Goldman Sachs says the following: "The main reason we are less worried is that we expect the economy to be weak this year with solidly below potential growth." We the people, Americans who live paycheck to paycheck, Americans who depend on healthcare to live, they don't really have that luxury. Goldman Sachs is saying under Trump's America, they're less worried because it's already very clear that he's harmed the economy, and they've prepared for Donald Trump to harm the economy.
What do Goldman Sachs, airlines turning their backs on the U.S., and oil billionaires regretting Trump have in common? They're all signs he's not just failing regular Americans, he's doubling down on policies that hurt them. Stick around, because we're unpacking how Trump's latest moves could hit your pocket harder than you think. Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favor. If you appreciate this content, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch the videos without subscribing. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference to us. So, did you click the subscribe button? Great, thank you so much. Now, back to the video. Have you noticed how Goldman Sachs never seems to panic no matter how rough the economy looks?
Right now, the oil chiefs, in this instant karma, who supported Donald Trump, they're warning of an end to the U.S. shale boom. Companies are cutting spending and idling their drilling rigs. The chief executive officer of Diamondback Energy, which recently warned investors U.S. oil production has probably peaked. Every single conversation I've had is that this oil price won't work. Americans don't want to have to worry that Donald Trump's going to make some post and that may lead to their foreclosure or their eviction and inability to pay rent.
That's because they're not exactly sweating over rising grocery bills or skyrocketing rents. That's something reserved for regular folks like us. For Wall Street elites, Trump's economic moves aren't a disaster. They're practically a golden ticket. Why? Because when things go south, they've got the funds, the accountants, and the offshore bank accounts to ride it out without breaking a sweat. Meanwhile, the average American, they're bracing themselves every time they visit the gas station or check out at the grocery store. Inflation doesn't hit everyone equally. It slams those already struggling the hardest. A recent survey found that nearly 60% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. Imagine juggling rent, medical bills, and now a grocery bill that feels more like paying for concert tickets. And then there's the wage stagnation. People are working harder, longer hours, only to watch their buying power shrink month after month.
The problems were caused by Trump's first administration and the fact that Trump added $8 trillion to the deficit the first time around. Now it's going to be like $20 or $30 trillion. And Donald Trump promised that he was going to make all of these things magically better. He said right away, despite the fact under former President Biden, things were all moving in the right direction. What else is he raising money for? It is tax exempt. So it's tax-free money. And then he spends that money on Mar-a-Lago, and at his resort. So that's part of the grift right there.
Compare that to how Trump-era tax cuts worked magic for the ultra-rich. Billionaires watched their bank accounts puff up like they'd won the lottery. Jeff Bezos could probably buy a cheeseburger without noticing the price hike. But for most families, that same cheeseburger has turned into a budget-breaking dinner. Trump's policies didn't just fail to address this, they pushed the gap between rich and poor even wider. Cut taxes for corporations? That's great news if you're a CEO with a yacht to upgrade. For the rest of us, good luck finding those trickle-down benefits. Spoiler alert, they don't exist. And here's where it gets even grimmer. Deregulation, another hallmark of Trump's playbook, puts everyday folks at even more risk. From scaling back housing protections to slimmed-down consumer safety standards, these changes overwhelmingly help the rich cut corners and rake in more profits, while ordinary families are left to deal with the fallout. So, Trump promised to help the forgotten man, right? Funny how that works when forgotten actually means completely ignored. And it's not just families. His priorities hit everything from food safety to healthcare. How's that for a leader with working class appeal? What kind of leader sees public health crises mounting and decides, you know what needs less oversight? Tanning beds and gun silencers? Apparently, Trump. While families worried about putting food on the table or staying healthy through a pandemic, his administration was busy rolling back health and safety regulations, as if tanning salons needed a special favor. Here's the kicker. All this deregulation didn't just ignore public crises, it made them worse. Take the Indiana E. coli outbreak. It started quietly, but what unfolded was devastating. Over 80 people were sickened, including a 9-year-old boy named Colton George, who spent weeks in the hospital and nearly died.
An E. coli outbreak in Indiana sickened more than 80 people, but the details never surfaced. This little boy who almost died because the Trump regime is hiding data and they're covering up diseases because food safety inspections are being scaled back and the public was not notified after an investigation into E. coli contamination.
And where did it come from? A tainted batch of romaine lettuce grown on a farm that ended up being linked to an earlier outbreak across 15 states. The FDA even had internal memos about it. But here's the problem. Under Trump's scaled-back food inspections, the chances of catching these issues earlier took a nosedive. The result? More cases, more illnesses, and more families, like the George, left to pick up the pieces. And yet, public notification about this outbreak? Practically non-existent. Now compare that to the effort Trump put into deregulating tanning beds and loosening restrictions on gun silencers. These aren't life and death issues for most people, but for some reason, they got attention while matters like affordable healthcare or food safety were tossed aside. Meanwhile, COVID-19 booster shortages and sky-high healthcare bills were piling on to millions of Americans. It's hard not to see a deal here. Make it easier for certain industries to do what they want in exchange for what? Campaign checks? Quiet favors? Because the priorities sure weren't with families who can't even afford to take a sick day, let alone a hospital bill. So, who's actually benefiting from these decisions? The billionaires Trump cozies up to, clearly. They get tax breaks and deregulations that help them make more money, while everyone else gets higher grocery bills and fewer safeguards. And here's the thing. Industries once considered supporters, like oil and aviation, are beginning to second-guess him too. Trump loves to call himself a champion of the forgotten man, but let's get real. Who's forgotten here? Regular families struggling to pay rent and medical bills, or billionaires cashing in on tax cuts? His policies didn't just miss helping average Americans. They practically handed the ultra-rich a velvet rope to the VIP section. And as for Trump's promises, they seem custom-made for people who don't check their bank balances. So, ask yourself, do these priorities look like someone fighting for the everyday American? Change starts with accountability, because staying informed and voting are how we stop being the ones forgotten.